In the year 2006, Ghulam Yahya Akbari, who was a mayor and a former minister of public works, resigned from the Afghan government and began a guerrilla war against the American occupation of Afghanistan. Ghulam Yahya defected from the corrupt American-backed government who had allowed the Americans to occupy Afghanistan. He resigned from his position as the mayor of the city of Herat and retreated into the mountains where he began his fight against the American invaders. Ghulam Yahya and his army of loyal fighters began attacking American military bases in western Afghanistan. Ghulam Yahya rejected the American occupation and declared war against the American and NATO invaders. Ghulam Yahya was a popular figure who had been elected as the mayor of the city of Herat due to his reputation as a brave anti-Soviet guerrilla fighter during the 1980s. When the Soviets were kicked out of Afghanistan, Ghulam Yahya was elected the mayor of Herat, as he was respected by the people for his generosity and his strong stances against corruption. However, during the 1990s, Afghanistan descended into a civil war when rival Afghan factions began to fight each other for power. Ghulam Yahya refused to take sides in the civil war and fled to Iran, where he stayed for a few years. Ghulam Yahya returned to Afghanistan in 2001, and he was welcomed by the people of Herat, who reappointed him as the mayor of the city. However, when the Americans occupied Afghanistan, he resigned from his position and took up arms against the Americans. When the Americans invaded Afghanistan, many brave Afghans picked up their weapons and began fighting the Americans. Even groups who disagreed with the Taliban also began fighting the Americans. These groups joined forces with the Taliban in order to expel the American invaders, and they agreed to settle their differences once the Americans were kicked out of Afghanistan. Rebel groups such as Hizb Islami, the Muhammad Ismail Front, tribal militias, and even Sufi and Shia rebel groups began fighting the Americans. All of the ethnic and religious groups of Afghanistan were united against the American invaders. Many Pashtun, Tajik, Uzbek, and Hazara rebel groups declared war against the Americans, and the flame of resistance was ignited in every province of Afghanistan. During the 20-year struggle against American occupation, one of the most effective resistance groups was led by Ghulam Yahya Akbari, who was an ethnic Tajik from western Afghanistan. Ghulam Yahya formed his own rebel army known as the Herat Mujahideen. After defecting from the American-backed government, Ghulam Yahya Akbari began a violent war against the Americans. After defeating the Americans in many battles, and after the Americans were kicked out of the Guzara district of Herat, Ghulam Yahya Akbari established his own state and began collaborating with other Afghan groups. Although he disagreed with the ideology of the Taliban, Ghulam Yahya Akbari collaborated with them in order to expel the American invaders. Ghulam Yahya exchanged information with the Taliban and allowed them to pass through the territory under his control. Ghulam Yahya and his group of Mujahideen managed to kill many American and NATO soldiers. He did not target civilians and only focused on attacking American bases, checkpoints, soldiers, helicopters, and vehicles. The Americans were losing huge amounts of men and were getting frustrated and anxious. Therefore, the Americans promised a $100,000 reward for anyone who could find Ghulam Yahya Akbari. However, this tactic failed, as Ghulam Yahya had the full support of his people. The Americans tried to eliminate Ghulam Yahya but were defeated again and again. One of the American helicopters sent to find Ghulam Yahya was shot down by his fighters. Ghulam Yahya Akbari fought the Americans for 3 years and was eventually killed in 2009 in a firefight with the Americans in the mountains. 22 of his men were killed. However, Ghulam Yahya initially managed to survive the attack and took refuge in the tent of a nomadic Pashtun tribe where he died of his wounds. Therefore, his body was not captured by the Americans and was sent to his village, where he was buried by his own people. The funeral of Ghulam Yahya Akbari was attended by 5,000 people. When the Americans were finally kicked out of Afghanistan in 2021, many members of the Akbari family joined the new Taliban government. Ghulam Yahya Akbari was a man of principles. Unlike many Afghan warlords who stayed quiet during the American invasion, Ghulam Yahya fought against the Americans just like he fought against the Soviets, and he refused to let the future of Afghanistan be decided by the Americans. چو دشمن همیشه مرا دشمن است مرا ملتی پاک و هر دم شهید همه شیر میدان ز مرد و زن است زیادت مبر ای مرا هموطن رشادت بود ریشه جان و تن شهامت شهادت همیشه به باد چو باد جزو